I may have to attempt an accent with this one, Barry, because it's from the Coolangatta Herald, New South Wales. It's from their missing persons column. It says, Jack Borthwick is anxious to trace his wife, Mariel, who left their family home at 46 Walnut Creek, Coolangatta 3 weeks ago and has not been in touch since. If anyone knows of her whereabouts, would they please contact him at that address? If you are reading this, Mariel, please come home. Or failing that, leave the truck somewhere convenient.
Hi, I'm Tony Robinson, and that was Alan Corran on Radio 4's News Quiz. I am a Radio 4 junkie. When I'm filming abroad, if there's one thing I get massive withdrawal symptoms from, apart from my kids, obviously, and my girlfriend, and English beer and the football, it's Radio 4. Loads of our most brilliant TV writers, producers, performers and programmes started on Radio 4. From Hancock's Half Hour to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Whose Line Is It Anyway to Alan Partridge. And where did Have I Got News For You mutate from? The News Quiz, of course.
Alan, whose Girl Friday proved to be a cult hit?
Girl Friday. Cult hit. This is some religious
We know
question.
over here. She was a pornographer.
No.
She was a nude model, not a porn model. Same thing. She was a nude model.
An enthusiastic nudist.
Appeared in Penthouse. This was all out of the week of the Labour conference. And anyway, this week it turns out she's a member of Exegesis, a cult run by a man called Robert Daubigny, if you really want the details.
Oh, that's wonderful. Brilliantly answered.
Did you get paid to advertise all these people?
I thought Exegesis was a skin complaint. So that cult of the solar temple thing where they all got together and killed themselves or were murdered, I always thought it would be a bit of a bugger if that was the first meeting you'd gone to. Say, I like to keep an open mind about these things. I'll just pop along, you know. I'll give it a go. I'll give it one go at least.
Radio 4's used to programmes being poached by telly. It's a sort of a compliment, really. Radio can be experimental in a way television can't, and the result is programmes like The Shuttleworths. Completely off the wall and a bit of an acquired taste. So if you're not sure the first time you listen to this next clip, spin the cassette back as many times as it takes to get you hooked. Then, in a couple of years' time, when John Shuttleworth's doing his stuff on TV, you'll remember where you heard him first.
Here's a bit of soil on the floor. Better hoover that up before Mary sees it. Hey, just thought, that could be an item. Yeah, how to hoover a carpet with a bit of soil on it. Because, you know, it's an isolated part of the room. You don't need to unwind the whole flex. So, start it off with your foot. You want it to bend down. And off you go. Of course, there was a time in the 70s when we did not own a vacuum cleaner due to financial restraints. And one day, Mary said to me, she said, John, I want a vacuum cleaner. I said, we can't afford it, love. It's a luxury item. And she left me. And I went into the street looking for her. I did. I said, hey, have you seen my wife? I said, hey, have you seen her? She left me after a row. It was over a vacuum cleaner. I said, what's wrong with the broom? And she said something obscene. Oh, Mary, please come back and I'll buy you a vacuum cleaner. But she didn't come back. And she wanted her sisters in Ashton-under-Lyne. Didn't know where she was. Had 2 young children to feed. It was a terrible time. And I asked the butchers, the bakers, not the candlestick makers, obviously, because they don't have those anymore, do they? But I even put out a request on local radio. Hey, have you seen my wife? I said, hey, have you seen her? She left me after a row. It was over a vacuum cleaner. I said, what's wrong with the broom? And she said something obscene. Oh, Mary, please come back and I'll buy you a vacuum cleaner. Well, I'm delighted to report that she did return. And I bought her this lovely second-hand cylinder model. She's still going well, you know. Though, a bit of a smell, actually. A bit of smoke coming up.
Why is that so funny? I don't know. but I do think he's absolutely brilliant. That was John Shuttleworth, played by Graham Fellows, who, incidentally, and this is true, actually records the programme himself in his garage at home. For a lot of people, it's the news coverage on Radio 4 that first gets them listening. I know my 19-year-old daughter's just discovered the Today programme. It's just as much a household name as the Archers or Woman's Hour. And to listen to John Humphreys laying into a politician like Michael Heseltine over breakfast puts me in a much better mood for the day.
We've seen Mr. Clark being undermined by people from your own side this week,
Look,
haven't we?
in government, it is the easiest thing in the world to find some member of the same party as the Chancellor who makes some injudicious remark which is then blown out of all
What,
significance.
injudicious, saying he ought to be sacked?
Oh, well, that's plain.
That's pretty
basic.
injudicious, I suppose.
Look, I'm a moderate man. I chose my word injudicious with care, not to offend the susceptibilities of my colleagues in the House of Commons. But anyone who says Ken Clarke should be sacked is frankly barking. Now, is that better for you?
That's much better, I understand that.
I don't understand how John and Sue McGregor and James Naughtie and the team managed to maintain such a high quality of journalism day after day, asking all the questions that I want answered. And it's a tribute to the programme that both the Conservatives and Labour continue to feel threatened by it. Here's a few reminders of events from the last year or so. The World at 1 p.m, the 6 o'clock news, and The World Tonight, as heard on Radio 4.
The main news today. The Labour leader John Smith has died after a heart attack. Mr. Smith, who was 55, collapsed with chest pains at his London flat. He was taken to St Bartholomew's Hospital, where he died at 1:15.
World at One's reporter, Mike Williams, was in the centre of Zagreb this morning as the rockets crashed in.
It's now just gone 12 o'clock here in Zagreb, and more mortar bombs have come down. It's chaos here at the moment. There are unexploded bomblets dropped out of the cluster bombs, still lying flat on the floor.
It's PM at 5 p.m. with Chris Lowe in Belfast and Linda Lewis.
It is a day that many had begun to fear they might never see. A nightmare is coming to an end.
Very, very pleased, and that is a piece of news that will be welcomed by Irish people everywhere.
I see no suggestion of a permanent cessation of violence.
Red Cross workers in the Central African state of Rwanda say thousands of people have been killed in 2 days of fighting in the capital.
This is, for all South Africans, an unforgettable occasion. It is the realization of hopes and dreams.
And Cantona has got involved with a fan in the front row of the stand, and they're exchanging punches, and now the other players have come in to shepherd Cantona away. Cantona leapt with both feet into the front row and physically struck the fan, who hit back. Frankly, I've never seen anything like it.
Ooh-ah. While we're on journalism, I can't remember a time when I didn't listen to From Our Own Correspondent. The BBC's got reporters all over the world, and Radio 4 taps into their experiences to transport us to places we can often only imagine. It creates such clear pictures with just the spoken word that your imagination doesn't really have to do too much work at all. Here's Tim Sebastian with a report from St Petersburg in Russia.
Colonel Orloff and I aren't having a good evening. It's 3 a.m. on a Friday night in the miserable run-down police station on Chekhov Street, right in the city centre. The place hasn't been painted in 40 years or repaired. Below us, the station sergeant is listening to 30s dance music on a tinny little loudspeaker. If it wasn't for the shocking crime rate, you'd think we were lost without trace in the 50s. To make us both tea, Orloff inserts an electric element into a jam jar full of water, spreads a piece of newspaper on the desk and cuts a loaf of bread into slices. "Let's have supper," he says, and so we do. It's a chance for Orloff to give vent to some of the growing frustrations in a police force that is bought and corrupted by organised crime, that hasn't got enough cars to get to the raids it plans, that leaks information like a paper bag in a storm. "You have to be an enthusiast to work here," he says. "I dream of a time when we'll have computers connected to something, when I don't have to spend half the day on the phone trying to find out the owner of a car." Faced with a new breed of criminal entrepreneur, Orloff and his colleagues aren't just outclassed, they're not even in the race. They don't solve crimes, they register them, if they're lucky. The murder rate, even according to official figures, is around 900 a year, considerably higher than for the whole of Britain. In fact, the real figures may be twice as high. The crooks have filled the vacuum created by state confusion and incompetence, and a level of corruption scarcely imaginable in a giant modern state. Russia isn't about justice. It's about which hand is stronger, which gun has more bullets in it, who can shoot straighter, who can pay the larger bribes. Don't ever forget who you're dealing with, said an underworld contact. Violent, ruthless people, many times more savage than your own criminals in the West. They're born out of economic hardship, he told me. We have a saying in Russia, the hungry wolf runs faster. Well, these hungry wolves haven't just run faster, they've run off. And what's more, they've dragged the country with them.
From our own correspondent, with Tim Sebastian. Back home, Radio 4 takes on the crooks itself. Week after week on Face the Facts, John Waite gets beaten up by some dodgy character or mighty institution who've taken advantage of the underdog. And in this example, it's the Ministry of Defence under the spotlight. Neil Hughes was a soldier who was accidentally shot by friendly fire on a training exercise. He was rushed to hospital, and while he fought for his life, his wife Ellen and their daughter Tammy were left to sit it out in the waiting room.
I'd just gone to the bathroom, and when I come back, there was a man doctor, and I knew then that something else had happened. And he asked me to sit down, and he just said, "I'm sorry, but Neil has died." And that was basically all he could say. He just said, "I'm sorry," and he went and left us, well, to our own grief. I waited an hour or so before I told Tammy. And I took her to one side on my own, and I sat and rocked her. And I told her that her daddy had been very poorly, and that the doctors had done a whole lot of things for him, but his body was too poorly, and he died, and that he'd gone to heaven.
Despite the sympathy of the battalion, in the aftermath of her husband's death, Ellen Hughes was given few details of how he'd come to be shot, nor was there an Army Board of Inquiry. It wasn't until the civil inquest, a full year later, that she sat in a coroner's court and heard how her husband had fallen in a hail of bullets as an ill-planned war game went tragically wrong. It was only then, as she sat sobbing in an open courtroom, that she was allowed to know that her husband's last words in a blood-stained trench were for her and the child. It came as a considerable shock to Mrs. Hughes to discover, shortly before we went on air, that there will almost certainly be no Board of Inquiry at all. In a brief response to our questions, the Ministry of Defence said that all the facts were established during the coroner's inquest, and therefore no Board of Inquiry is required. All this came as news to Mrs. Hughes.
I just find it diabolical that anybody else can find out this information, which me, as the widow, should have been told first. And I still don't even know it from the MOD. I have still heard it second-hand, as I have done everything else. I just feel, again, that I have been excluded whenever I should have been the main one.
It will have been some comfort to Ellen Hughes that a week after the programme was broadcast, she received a cheque as part of a full compensation package from the MOD for her and Tammy. Anyway, that's some of the programmes on Radio 4. Starting to feel interested? Turn over and see what else we've got for you.